some sound at an adventure outdoors gun shop near Atlanta this week after the Orlando shooting. An employee telling NBC News that they were selling more AR-15 semi-automatic rifles in 1 hour than they usually do in a single day.
Normally we might sell 3 or 4 a day, but we've been selling about 10 an hour, and then right around lunchtime we were selling about 15 an hour.
Let's get two voices in here on both sides of this debate. Joining me from, Springfield, Virginia, Erich Pratt is Executive Director of Gun Owners of America. Nice to have you with us. Thank you, Erich.
Thank you, Jane. Good to be with you.
Thank you. And joining me from New York is Brina Milikowsky. She's the Chief Strategy Officer for Everytown for Gun Safety, a gun violence prevention group founded by former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Everytown has been working with Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey to restrict terrorist access to weapons. Welcome to you, Brina.
Thanks for having me, Jane.
So, Erich Pratt, let me ask you first off here. When you first heard about Orlando, about the shooting there, about this killer then who bought his weapons, including an assault rifle, legally, what were your first thoughts?
Grief. We grieve tremendously over what happened in Orlando and the lives that were lost. And we think it would be prudent to listen to the law enforcement community as to what helps prevent these shootings from occurring. They actually encourage concealed carry by citizens. Now, first, what doesn't work, background checks. The killer passed multiple background checks to buy his firearms. Secondly, gun-free zones. The killer ignored them. Everyone in that bar obeyed the gun-free zone law except the killer. It's interesting, when you look at all the public mass shootings in this country, over 98% of them occur in these criminal safety zones where good people are barred from carrying firearms. Killers prefer gun-free zones. Now, the law enforcement community says 86% of police say that the way that you avert these mass shootings is by utilizing concealed carriers because they're the real first responders. You know, it's interesting. A year ago this month, there was a mass shooting attempt in an Ohio bar, but that one ended much differently because an employee at the bar had a concealed carry permit and shot the guy several times, killing him, and thereby saving everybody's life. No innocent life was lost. And as you look around the country, you see many examples of that. In a hospital in Darby, Pennsylvania, another mass shooter stopped in his tracks. At a barber shop in Philadelphia, at a church in Orlando, Florida, on and on and on. You see that mass shooters are stopped by good guys with guns, and that's what the police are actually advocating.
And so, Brina Milikowsky, what's your response to that?
First of all, background checks work when the right laws are in place. The background check system has stopped more than 2.5 million felons, convicted domestic abusers, severely mentally ill people from buying guns. Background checks were not able to stop the Orlando shooter because we have a gaping loophole that's a national security threat in our law where suspected terrorists can't be blocked from buying guns. If the Feinstein proposal, which hopefully the Senate is going to vote on today, was in place already, it seems that the Orlando shooter would have actually been prevented from buying his weapons of terrorism. Well, second, I'm not sure where Erich is getting his facts, but we look at all mass shootings that the FBI qualifies as a mass shooting, which is 4 or more fatalities. We've looked at every single one since 2009, and the vast majority of them actually occur in private residences. And of those that do occur in public, the overwhelming majority of those occur in places where it is legal to carry firearms. You know, our public conversation about mass shootings is not always entirely accurate. The fact is 57% of them are actually incidents of domestic violence. And while the gun lobby is trying to sell the notion that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy and a gun, the fact of the matter is laws work, and public safety measures that will keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people in the first place is the right common sense measure that most Americans are calling for.
I think, Brina, let me put this to you. I think Erich and others are saying that this is a slippery slope, that if you start restricting one thing, then what's next?
Jane, with all
Brina, let me ask Brina to respond to that. Brina, go ahead.
I appreciate those concerns, and I would say that with rights come with responsibilities. And I support the Second Amendment, but I understand that our Constitution is not a suicide pact. It's a framework for creating a balance between individual liberties, public safety, and an environment in which all Americans can be free to live to their greatest potential. In our current system of laws, there are gaping loopholes that make it far too easy for convicted felons, suspected terrorists, repeat domestic abusers to easily access guns, even though public safety and data shows that they have very likely they're very likely to commit dangerous, lethal acts with those guns, and that's the public safety threat that we have to balance here.
And so, Erich Pratt, let me ask you this. A lot of people want to understand why a civilian ever needs to own an assault rifle. To that you say what?
Well, first, I'd like to address an earlier point, and that is it is absolutely true that most of the massacres, public massacres, are occurring in gun-free zones where the killers bought their guns legally. San Bernardino, the Oregon Community College, Charleston, Chattanooga, both Fort Hood shootings, the Aurora shooting, the Navy Yard shooting, Sandy Hook, and Columbine, all of those were gun-free zones. We see this over and over and over again. Now, to your question, about semi-automatic firearms and who would want to own one, first of all, I would say it's an offensive question because we have a Bill of Rights, not a Bill of Needs. So to say, why do you need to exercise, heck, why do we need to meet in bars? If we banned bars, you wouldn't have had that killed, nor would you have had the one that occurred with gasoline and matches in 1990, where Julio Gonzalez, using matches and gasoline, killed 87 people. Now, obviously, that's an absurd question to start going down that road. We have a Bill of Rights which says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So your question involves an infringement. Now, why do people own them? They own them for self-defense. Look at the Los Angeles riots. Look at Hurricane Katrina. People use those types of firearms to defend themselves against roving gangs, against rioters. In the Los Angeles riots, it was the Koreans that were defending their stores. Their stores didn't burn down, whereas other stores around them did that were left unprotected.
And so, Adam Winkler, do we need assault rifles for self-defense?
Well, these weapons are not typical self-defense weapons. They can be used for self-defense like just about any firearm, but it's typically preferred by people for hunting and sport. The vast majority of owners don't use them primarily for self-defense. I will say that I think that regulating assault weapons is sort of the wrong focus. These weapons are generally not used in criminal activity, and while they are associated with some high-profile mass shooters, most mass shooters just use handguns. And I personally don't believe that in Orlando things would have been fundamentally different had he had several handguns rather than his assault rifle. So my view is we shouldn't be focusing on a particular kind of gun. There are so many easy substitutes. If we want to reduce gun violence, we have to keep the bad guys from getting any guns.
A lot of calls want to get in here. Let me get a listener in here, Eric. Hold on. Nicholas in Medford, Massachusetts. You're on the air. Welcome to On Point.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
I just want to frame the discussion here.
Okay.
On one hand, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. On one hand, we have what many refer to as a crisis of these mass shootings, and on the other, we have sets of proposals each to restrict the ability of certain people to buy guns. Do we have statistics to look into the number of, especially even prior incidents, that each of these proposals would prevent? In other words, for the real-world crisis we face right now, how effective are each proposal at reducing these incidents of violence?
That's a good question, Nicholas. Adam Winkler.
Well, we don't know exactly. Of course, we've never sort of operationalized these principles in for instance, the no-buy list to try to figure out whether it would have a significant effect. Part of the problem is, with regards to gun control more generally, is that there's just not that much research on gun violence prevention and what kinds of gun control laws work. One of the reforms we really could use is to free up the Center for Disease Control to finance studies, even if those studies might show that gun control laws could work. Currently, we have the NRA and its allies in Congress have really shut down the spigot of federal money that really provides public health research and would give us more information so that we could make good and effective gun control laws that don't interfere with people's right to bear arms.
Let's go to Medina, Ohio. Elaine is on the
Jane,
line.
can I just
Hold on one second. Let's get Elaine here. Go ahead, Elaine. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
My question is, since the NRA only has 3 million members, which is almost less than 1% of the population of the United States, why do they have such a stranglehold on the Republicans in the Congress, since this seems to be such a bipartisan issue? The other question is, we've done the assault ban before, 1994, we just let it expire. Why can't we do it again? It just seems ridiculous from the people I talk to in Ohio, the Republicans in Ohio, that we don't have a better grip on this problem and don't solve it.
Elaine, thank you. Brina, I'll let you answer the first question. Why does the NRA seem to have a stranglehold on Republicans? Elaine wants to know.
That's a great question, and I would put it in a bit more historical context and say until recently the NRA had a stranglehold on both parties. And even if you look at the incredible leadership of so many Democratic senators last night in the filibuster, several of them had been NRA A-rated until very recently when they finally came around and are really standing up and leading on this issue. I think the absence of a strong voice and a counterweight for much of my lifetime at least, gave the gun lobby outsized power and gave them a false sense of, gave elected officials a misunderstanding of where their constituents are at. But we've seen a sea change in energy and advocacy and visibility and engagement on this issue. We at Everytown alone have more than 3.5 million members in all 50 states who are calling their members of Congress, who are visiting state houses to lobby for common sense gun laws. And we're just part of a growing movement that is putting, proof of concept to the poll after poll that we've seen that the common sense solutions that we're advocating for are overwhelmingly supported by voters. We've seen Democrats get the message. At the state level, we've been able to make progress with bipartisan support of many proposals and Republican governors signing common sense gun laws in a few states in the last few years. So I'm confident that in the next few years, we're going to see more and more people from both parties stand up and lead on this issue.
Erich Pratt, I'm going to get to you in a minute here. Let's play this sound from West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin defending America's use of the AR-15 assault rifle.
I know with the AR-15 that you're talking about and the type of weapon and what it's used for, the people that go hunting, and we don't use that type of a gun, but there's an awful lot of people that do collect and they do go sport shooting. And they use it for a very legitimate, very legal way.
Very legitimate, very legal uses for the assault rifle. Erich Pratt, 57% of Americans, however, say they support a federal bill that bans assault weapons outright. Your response?
Well, first of all, I would say there's conflicting polls on that, but irregardless, the beauty of having a constitution is that it trumps whatever the opinion polls say. If a majority wants to ban certain speech or if a majority wants to support slavery, the Constitution trumps those views. And so, we're a country that loves to be guided by polls, but really it doesn't matter when you have in your highest law something that says that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, in regard to these firearms, the word assault weapons has been thrown around, but actually there is no such thing. The New York Times admitted last year that it was a Democrat-invented term. There's no army on the face of the earth that uses AR-15s or the 6 Sauer that the killer used down in Orlando. The New York Times said that it's never been the weapon of choice. In fact, more people are killed with knives and baseball bats and hammers. And the Times also said that the ban was ineffective. It's interesting that since the ban expired in 2004, we are actually safer today. Those guns are once again legal, and our murder rate has gone down 20% since 2004. So we're actually safer today with those guns being legal.
Adam Winkler, is that true?
Well, I don't think that there's any evidence to tie our current law on assault weapons with the drop in the homicide rate or the drop in the crime rate. I know of no studies that control for other variables to make that causal relationship clear. But it is true that these weapons are used only infrequently in criminal activity. Most criminals just prefer handguns, and most gun violence really is handguns. That's why I think it is more important to focus on things like universal background checks, on a no-fly/no-buy list. What we want to do is everything we can to keep all of the guns out of the hands of the bad people. And whether a law-abiding person has access to an assault weapon, even if it sounds bad and it sounds dangerous, probably isn't a much greater danger to the public.
This is On Point. I'm Jane Clayson in for Tom Ashbrook. We're talking about the new push for stricter gun laws after the Orlando nightclub shooting, and you can join the conversation. What are the gun laws in your state? Do they need to be stricter or not? Here's Florida gun dealer Ed Henson of the St. Lucie Shooting Center, which is a range and gun shop not far from where the nightclub shooter lived, saying that he did everything by the book when he sold the shooter a handgun and a rifle. Here he is on Monday at a press conference.
An evil person came in here and illegally purchased 2 firearms from us. And if he hadn't purchased them from us, I'm sure he would have gotten them from another local gun store in the area. This man held multiple security licenses. He had an armed and an unarmed license. He passed the background check that every single person that purchases a firearm in the state of Florida undergoes.
Joining me this hour, Erich Pratt, the Executive Director of Gun Owners of America, Brina Milikowsky, an Everytown for Gun Safety Director, and Adam Winkler, a Second Amendment and constitutional law expert at the UCLA School of Law. Brina, you hear that gun dealer, that shop owner saying, here, the shooter, purchased these legally. He had multiple security licenses. He had an armed and an unarmed license. He passed a background check. What more do you need?
To me, that's a call for the kinds of common sense proposals that the Democrats in the Senate have been staying up late for last night. The Orlando shooter is one of more than 2,000 people that the FBI had under investigation for suspected terrorism who legally bought guns in this country in the last decade, because the FBI does not currently have authority to block sales to people known to be engaging in acts of terrorism or suspected of doing so. And the Orlando shooting was just the 6th mass shooting in the last few years to be investigated by the FBI as an act of terrorism. So I think it's high time that the Congress close the terror gap loophole. And more broadly speaking, to Adam's earlier point, universal background checks will also have will go a long way in making sure that we're not making it so easy for dangerous people to buy guns and illegally traffic them on our streets. And we know this is going to work because in the states that have already closed this loophole and do require criminal background checks for all sales, there are 46% fewer women shot to death by intimate partners. There's 48% fewer law enforcement shot to death. There's 48% less illegal gun trafficking. We've got a crisis with hundreds of thousands of Americans dying from gun violence in the last few years alone, and we've got solutions on the table that we know could help cut some of those numbers in half.
Let's get David in here from New London, Kentucky. David, glad you called. Welcome to On Point.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
I own an AR-15. I use it for target shooting, fun shooting. My kids have hunted with it. They've killed deer with it. It is my primary home defense weapon. I also have semi-automatic pistols. And what kills me about this whole discussion about the Orlando issue, it is very obvious that the shooter in Orlando was very, very motivated. Very motivated, was willing to murder 100 people, did murder 49. And it kills me to hear these conversations that, we need one more law and it would have stopped this guy. No, it wouldn't have. A person like that is going to keep pushing, and that's what they do. But it's not going to. He's not going to go, oh gosh, it's illegal for me to buy a gun. Oh, I guess I won't go kill 100 people because I'm in love with ISIS. And these conversations are just ignorant sounding. Anyway, thank you,
David. Thank you, Brina Milikowsky. Doesn't matter the guns, doesn't matter the weapons. It's the motivation.
I'm with everyone this week feeling shocked and outraged and upset by the level of hatred and evil out in the world. And I'm an attorney myself and a pragmatist, and I would never say that one law is going to stop all crime or prevent all future acts of evil or war or terrorism. But I also firmly believe that laws work, and that public safety measures that are data-driven and evidence-based can make a strong impact on protecting our communities. And I do think that the American people deserve a government that's willing to do everything that they can to protect our national security, to protect our communities, and to protect our families. When we're facing 91 Americans dying every single day from gun violence in this country, I think we have to take every action that we can to see what we can do to stop this crisis.
David, glad you called. I've got some listener comments here for you, Erich. Jeff says, good guys with good guns don't need AR-15s. Wanda says, I gave up after Sandy Hook. If 20 dead babies are not enough, nothing is. James says, I'm an off-duty police officer working at the, an off-duty police officer was working at the Orlando nightclub. He was outgunned. Gun against gun didn't work there. And Ben says America has half of the world's guns. By Erich Pratt's logic, we would have by far the safest country. To all of that, you say what?
Actually, the United States is not even in the top 100 when it comes to murder rates, and the nations that are in the top 100 all have much stricter gun control laws than we do. One of the things that is being ignored here is that we only focus on firearms after a tragedy. When Obama commissioned the CDC in 2013 to study firearms, it found that there were anywhere from 500,000 to 3 million cases of self-defense every year, which means when you bounce that against the number of tragic deaths, that means guns are being used in this country 16 to 100 times more often to save life than to take life. And that's why, like, all those mass shooters that were stopped at the hospital, at the barber shop, at the church, on the Chicago street corner, at the gas station in Louisiana, those don't get played in the media. And so people don't hear about them. And so the only time that if they're not in a gun community where they have friends or family that enjoy shooting firearms or keeping firearms for self-defense, then the only time they hear about a firearm is after a tragedy like this. And they're not hearing the many, many more good cases where firearms are used to actually protect life.
Eric, thank you. Adam Winkler, what do you hear here?
The truth of the matter is guns are sometimes used effectively for self-defense. I don't think there's much doubt about that basic question. The question is whether we can have good laws in effect that don't interfere with individual self-defense, but still allow us to do more to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. The truth is the kinds of reforms that we're talking about are not going to disarm the American public. We're talking about universal background checks. You want to buy a gun, you can buy a gun. Just go through and make sure that your system, that your information is run through a system to make sure you're not a bad guy. That's not a significant burden on gun owners. And a no-buy list. This is a slightly greater burden, I have no doubt, but the procedures will be put in place so that someone could challenge their determination that they're on the list, and it's expected to affect a grand total of 200 people a year. So the idea that somehow we're moving towards a society where people aren't going to be able to defend themselves with firearms just seems silly to me.
Here are protesters in support of the assault rifle ban standing outside the NRA headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia this week. Here's one man expressing that the right to bear arms does not extend to assault weapons.
We need the assault weapon ban to be back in place. We need to keep these guns off the street and unavailable. We're not talking about hunting rifles. We're not talking about your basic guns that you need for protection. That's all fine and good. We all support that. What we don't support is literally weapons of mass destruction. 49 people killed in a matter of minutes.
Adam Winkler, take us back. Help us understand the assault rifle ban from the 1990s. What motivated it? What motivated Washington to regulate assault weapons back then? Who was behind that effort, and what did the proposal seek to do?
Well, there was an effort to ban assault weapons, and it was really inspired first by a shooting in California that had involved one of these military-style rifles. And so California pushed to ban assault weapons, and that caught on and was enacted at the federal level. The difficult thing with the assault weapons ban is that it's hard to define exactly what an assault weapon is. Erich Pratt was right that there is no just clear category of assault weapon. So what you do is you tend to define a particular set of rifles by certain characteristics that seem especially military in styling. However, the gun makers just made the exact same guns with the exact same lethality, just without those offending military-style features, and sold them by the millions. And we still have that in California. We have the most restrictive assault weapons ban in the country, and you're still able to buy essentially the same weapons with just little gimmicks put on them so that they avoid the regulation. The problem with banning assault weapons is it's a little bit like saying we want to reduce drunk driving, so we're going to ban scotch. We're going to ban one particular kind of alcohol that we think is contributing too much to this kind of violence. When there's so many easy substitutes, you can't really expect that's going to result in a significant drop in criminal activity. So there'd be no way to know exactly who's got them. And part of the problem with these gun control proposals, if we ban possession, is that we find high rates of noncompliance. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sunnyvale, California have all banned the possession of high-capacity magazines, and what we found is that virtually no one is complying with those laws.
We've got a couple minutes left here. Erich Pratt, I want to read you this piece of this editorial from the Boston Globe today. It is shocking that a democracy as mature as ours is fundamentally unable to have an adult conversation about guns, as if the Second Amendment has sentenced us all to the unending argument about how many angels fit on the head of a firing pin. Do we need, Erich Pratt, to cut back on our long-held belief about gun ownership to meet the realities that we face today?
Well, it's interesting. They say they want to have an adult conversation, but then they only want to have that conversation after there's a tragedy. It would be like saying we're only going to talk about doctors or cars or swimming pools when after doctors accidentally kill somebody or there's a car crash or a child drowns. I mean, if you only talk about something in the negative, then that's not really having an adult conversation. An adult conversation would be, okay, let's talk about all these cases, which Obama's Center for Disease Control found 16 to 100 times more often guns being used in self-defense. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, one caller said we need waiting periods. Well, you know what? Let's talk about Carol Bound in New Jersey, who is dead because she was waiting through a waiting period for her firearm to protect herself from her former boyfriend who was violently threatening her, and she got security cameras, she got a restraining order, and she figured, you know what, that's not going to be enough. I'm going to need a gun because he's going to attack me and kill me. Well, she was waiting 47 days to get permission to buy a firearm in New Jersey, and sadly he showed up on the 47th day, stabbed her to death. He didn't need a gun, but she did.